Especially if you're making it up. Would you want people to know about this? Oh, great. My computer's scanning for viruses. It's a perfect thing to do on Friday night. Did you enjoy that? Was that a fun little diversion there? Line number 4. Women are spiritually inferior and must submit to the authority of men. This is a hot potato, isn't it? Well, I want you to think about something. In the ancient world, women were chattel. Okay? You could divorce her for burning your toast. If she witnessed a crime, she was not considered a valid witness in court. They carried the water, they did all this work, and men went and they had their little huddles and got comfortable. You know, it's kind of the ancient version of he works all day, she works all day, they come home, she cooks supper, he reads paper, right? Then they eat supper, and then he turns on NFL with a bag of Ruffles and a Budweiser, and he spends the whole evening watching Monday Night Football. She disciplines the kids, does the homework, does the laundry, cleans up dinner, and then 10 o'clock, NFL's over, she's exhausted, he's frisky. Okay? Is this life in America? Well, you know, back then, I dare say it was even worse. I mean, it's not like she had a washing machine. Well, so think about this. Jesus gets crucified. His body is taken down. He's buried in a tomb. Okay? 3 days later, some of his female friends come to the tomb. The door is wide open. Nobody's inside. They're shocked. They're even more shocked when Jesus shows up. He talks to them. He has a conversation with them. And then they run out and they tell the men. And then the men come and look. And they trip over each other and do all this kind of stuff. Now, if somebody had invented this story, they never would have told it that way. Because who would trust a bunch of women? So what does this mean? Well, this means two things. It means it's highly unlikely that this story was made up, because it totally cut against the grain of the culture. It also means that women were the first witnesses to the greatest event in all of human history. The resurrection of Christ is the hinge on which Christianity swings. Okay, Paul said, if the dead are not raised, we are above all men most to be pitied. If there's no such thing as the resurrection of the dead, we are like the most deluded people in the world. And who witnessed that? Women. So this also means that Christianity considers women's witness at least as valuable as men's. Now, doesn't that have sweeping implications? Here's another thing that I want you to think about. Today we have modern notions of equality, democracy, human rights, the idea that everybody's equal. We have the American Declaration of Independence that says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Right? Men and women, of course. Where did that idea come from? There's a book which is it's a pretty well-known book, at least in academic circles. I read it as part of one of my classes when I was a freshman in college. It's called Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. Tocqueville was a French guy. This was written in 1835. Okay? In the 1830s, think about this. The United States is 50 years old. It's the world's first democracy. It seems to be working. And everybody in the world is talking about it. All the people in Europe are talking about it. What's going on in America? What's going on over there? Well, the French aristocracy were kind of nervous. They're like, we kind of like being in charge here, and I don't think we want a democracy. Let's send Tocqueville over, and he can tell us everything that's going on there. Well, Tocqueville's book is a brilliant book. It is brilliant. When you read that book, you immediately see that he's got his finger on the pulse of Americans, and Americans have not changed much in 170 years. Now, at the very beginning of the book, he traces the idea of democracy. He says in America there are two ideas that dominate. There are two ideas that more than anything define what Americans are. And the two ideas are equality and individualism. Tocqueville coined the term individualism. He invented that word. He needed a word to describe Americans. Now, I'm not going to talk about individualism. That's a big subject. But Tocqueville asked the question, where did the idea of equality come from? He was a very well-read man. He was a very knowledgeable historian. He had read a lot of literature, and he traced the idea of equality to Galatians 3:28, where it says, in Christ there's neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, all are equal in Christ. And Tocqueville says, in the first chapter of Democracy in America, that is the first time in the ancient world that anybody ever said that. And then he goes on to explain that this idea got planted in Western culture and began to grow and began to develop. And he makes the comment that from 1100 AD to the present, which for him is 1835, from 1100 to the present, every major event in Europe created more equality, whether it was intended to or not. The Magna Carta, the invention of the gun, the invention of the horseshoe, the invention of the post office, the printing press. Every single one of those things brought more equality, not less. Who started it? Paul. So, can you really say that Christianity puts women down? What I think you can say is that an idea got planted and it took time for people to work it out. The Bible never says that explicitly that slavery is wrong. But you know what? If you read the Bible closely enough, you figure it out. And looking back through history, I don't think it would have been enough to just say, okay, get rid of slavery. That mankind, the church, and people at large needed to think this through and buy into the answer based on first principles, and they had to reason their way through it and get rid of slavery. It took a long time. It's not totally done yet. But understand that our modern ideas of equality come from Christianity. Our modern ideas of human rights come from Christianity. They sure don't come from the Greeks. They sure don't come from the Romans. They sure don't come from the Chinese. Powerful stuff. Line number 5. There is no single truth. Everyone needs to explore and find a truth that works for them. Well, I don't know that you hear this so much from ancient religious institutions, but you do hear it a lot. And it tends to be expressed something like this. You got your truth, I got my truth. You find a faith that works for you, I'll find a faith that works for me. And my question is, how many different versions of the truth can actually be true? If somebody says, you got your truth, I got my truth, is that his truth, your truth, or both of your truth? Well, there's a simple logical reality. I don't really like it, but it's true. It's impossible for all religions to be true. Okay, now let's just take, for example, Hinduism, to pick one example, says that God is in everything. That everything has a divine essence. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all say, no, divinity is not in everything. There is one God, and He is separate from His creation. Okay? Now, the description of God in Hinduism and the description of God in the monotheistic religions, not compatible. There's no way both of those things can be true in the same way. It's impossible. Now, that kind of raises the stakes a little, doesn't it? And again, I'm not really in love with this idea. Like, one religion is the Baha'i faith, and the Baha'i faith says that, I don't remember the names of all the prophets, but as I recall, Abraham's a prophet of the Baha'i faith. Muhammad is, Jesus is, something like that. There's a bunch of them, these religious gurus. And the Baha'i faith says that they're all God's prophets. I would love to believe that. I really would love to believe that. That would be like a kinder, gentler version of the world as far as I'm concerned. But you know what? Those prophets said things that are like diametrically opposed to each other. And I don't think you can reconcile that with like logic and reason. You can't. Now, there are always more wrong ways to do just about anything than right ways. Okay? If you want to drive to O'Hare Airport, there's more wrong ways to get there than right ways. If you want to write a computer software program, more wrong ways than right ways. Truth raises the stakes. It puts a sense of urgency on all of our questions. It shows that if we're not careful, we can fall for half-truth. On the other hand, if you do your homework, if you research the facts, if you study things, if the facts add up, if your heart tells you that you're doing the right thing, there is nothing wrong with you saying, I figured out the truth. Or at least I figured out part of the truth. There's nothing wrong with that. And you should. And the fact that you should do that does not in any way make it right to be unkind or mean to people who have done the same thing and they've come to different conclusions than you. It doesn't give us the right to fly airplanes into buildings or anything like that. What it does is it gives us the right and the opportunity to discuss and debate and explore. C.S. Lewis, I think, was talking about this when he said, you don't need to defend a lion, you just need to let him out of his cage. And in our culture, we've kind of got this, it's politically incorrect to talk about stuff like this in polite company. Now, in the process of answering all these emails and everything that come in from people, I've learned why we have a taboo about discussing religion. It's because most people aren't mature enough to do it. Okay? I get all kinds of people, they tell me I'm an idiot and all this other stuff.